Today's video has been sponsored by X4 Foundations and its upcoming Empire update, which is currently in public beta to test a complete overhaul of the combat systems of this enormous single-player space simulation game. Drop into a dynamic universe that starts from raw resources and goes up to massive factions fighting over territory, and you can take part in any level of it. You can go and fight stuff in person using fighters or capital ships, or send off vessels from your own custom-made faction to do your dirty work for you, or take part in trading to exploit a gap in the market that you found, even if it's one you've created through nefarious means. You can really just go and do what you want, including customizing your ships and space stations to your heart's desire, and then check them out on foot. The upcoming Empire update will feature an overhaul of how ships fight, including improvements to their equipment and how the AI flies, with new ways to command them directly from the map. There's also going to be a shiny new ship showroom module so you can bask in the magnificence of your collection. So if you're looking for a single-player space game to lose yourself in, check out X4 Foundations today with a link in the description and pinned comment below. We all love our spaceships, but they do need somewhere to go, and oftentimes that place is a space station. These permanent structures are like buildings, cities, or whole countries floating in the void, and are used for all sorts of things and come in all sorts of forms. They can be weapons, docks, industrial centres, or whole huge colonies in orbit. Today we'll be checking out some features and designs of the many stations we see in sci-fi. Also, our video editor wanted to include Isolon Fortress, so here it is. First off on our space station adventure, they can move. It's not much, but since low Earth orbit isn't a perfect vacuum, there's a tiny bit of drag there that slows things down until they fall out of orbit and spread debris over Australia, which goes on to fine NASA $400 for littering. To avoid these costly fines, stations get their altitude periodically boosted back up, using either their own engines or those of a visiting spacecraft. This is a tiny bit different to the mobile space stations we see occasionally in fiction, like the Death Star with its hyperspace jumps, or the 32nd Century Federation HQ and its warp drive. But should these really be referred to as stations? When does a station become a ship? While we're on Star Trek moving stations, the original Earth Spacedock was shifted to another star system using tugs, which reminds me of how oil platforms are moved around. As a concept, this is just so much more interesting to me than a simple mobile station. Those things certainly have their place though, but should just maybe be referred to differently. Let's move on to the various styles of space station and why they end up that way, starting at the beginning of real space station designs with the single-launch realistic style. Now, I don't know if there's really any of these in fiction outside of depictions of real-life ones like Salyut and Skylab. The design of the latter is particularly interesting because it was made from the repurposed third stage of the Saturn V moon rocket. To be fair to fiction, these are the literal first space stations ever and are very simple, so that's probably another reason why we don't see them. That early spaceflight period just doesn't come up much. The natural step up from this is the Modular NASA-punk thing, following the real-life trend of assembling stations out of many separate bits just like the ISS. These show up a good bit in various very near-future stories like Mission to Mars and stuff like that, done to mirror the real-life development of stations. These are sent up on many launches and assembled together over a long period of time, with the size of each part being limited by what the launch vehicles are capable of. There's only so much you can stuff onto the top of a rocket. Like all the bonus content the Spacedock Patreon has, like ship design books and ad-free early access to upcoming videos. Event Horizon briefly has a modular style station that I want to highlight for the extra boxy trusses it's made out of, which reminds me of the earliest unrealized concepts for Space Station Freedom, the US project that eventually became the ISS. The massive skeletal truss with bits haphazardly attached to it is a cool look when it's this basic. The ISS also does this, but the visual balance between truss and hab is much more on the hab side of things. Just a neat thing I wanted to point out, since it's not all habitable sections with solar panels glued to the outside. Starfield stations use this style of modular design too, though there it's done more for aesthetics than anything else. The problem here is that it just feels odd to have the technology level of the setting with FTL and generated gravity and fly anywhere spacecraft, and then marrying it to current day design limitations. That style style kind of works on the smaller spacecraft because of the ship creation system, but for big stations and stuff? I think it's sticking a bit too closely to the aesthetic without considering if things would actually be built that way. Can they not build things in space in the setting? I can't remember, it's been so long since I played it. Plus, it is entirely possible to have modular construction without it looking that way, such as with modern ships which are made from huge chunks welded together. A pretty common variant of space station is one that is built on or even in an asteroid. Depending on the size of the asteroid, you could say that instead this is more of a ground base, like Eros and especially Ceres in The Expanse. Either way, doing this is very sensible because it lets you directly mine raw resources to build more of the station, or really to build anything. Star Wars Skeleton Crew did a twist on this where the asteroid station was done as a pirate island analogue, which was very fun and shows it doesn't always have to be about industry or realism. The style of station can call back to and enhance the vibes of the story. The next step up applies to all of the above to some degree, though it is also a whole style of space station by itself. The artificial gravity centrifuge. With these you can avoid the nasty health problems humans get when living in microgravity for too long, like misshapen eyeballs and peeing your bones out. Another helpful quirk for stations in particular here is that the bigger and slower a centrifuge is, the easier it is for people to adjust to the rotation. And you don't need to stick to just a traditional ring for these stations. You can stack many rings together as seen in 2001: A Space Odyssey or in Cyberpunk 2077, or stretch it out lengthways to become an O'Neill cylinder. Not that one, these ones from Gundam. These are cool because the design has these huge windows along the length to let sunlight in. Babylon 5 is also a big cylinder, but it has artificial light inside instead. But the interesting thing it does is to have non-rotating exterior segments. Another cool cylinder variant is Mass Effect's Citadel, which is like a combo of these two mentioned styles. It has the torus-shaped presidium at one end, and coming off of that are 5 huge arms which make a sort of disconnected cylinder, and it can close up. Or you can do a cone or even a sphere if you don't mind different levels of gravity inside. One peculiarity of these stations is the difficulties that the rotation imparts on docking. It's just far easier to do it right at the middle, where you only have to match the rotation with your ship, rather than rotation and needing to move in a big circle. You can do that like we see in Elysium and Mass Effect, but it does expend more propellant and risks collision. At least you can get free velocity when undocking, since you can just drop out and away. The last and probably most common style of space station in fiction is the big, crazy, unrealistic thing that we all know and love to see. These are this way because they're all purely art-directed and absolutely wonderful because of it, from the utter classic that is Earth, Spacedock in Star Trek, to the weird compound shapes seen in EVE Online, to the great big ball that is the Death Star. I also want to mention the briefly seen Gateway Station from Aliens, because it's a bit different with its separated large sections that are attached together with long spars. It's like a really far future version of the realistic modular style and feels like it's organically grown over time. Like a city, it's neat. I think the huge blob of Jita 4-4 in EVE Online has this vibe too, though obviously on a significantly larger scale. Which is another thing to think about with stations. Each style we've talked about today comes kind of at its own point in technological progression, and alongside that the size of the stations also goes up. It starts at launches from the surface, progresses through to attaching those together in space, and goes up to being constructed in space, with each method increasing the maximum possible size. The biggest even frequently have spaceships zipping around inside of them, or become so large they might slip over into megastructure territory, or even get mistaken for celestial bodies. No matter the size of the station, it is going to need life support, which can be really hard depending on tech level. Maintaining that balance for all of the different things can get really complex. Look at what the ISS has to do here to keep cleaning the air, filtering the water and all that other stuff. Plus, moving everything around the station to get where it needs to go. And on a big station, your air vents are going to end up being massive. One of the more overlooked life support issues on spacecraft is the temperature, because vacuum is an insulator. It's hard to lose heat through it. So computer systems and body heat and all of that can make a spaceship or station become unhealthily hot inside unless you have radiators. That's what these big white panels on the outside of the ISS are. Coolant collects heat from around the station and runs through these radiators to fire off that thermal energy as photons. But again, tech level and story intent means you can just sort of ignore this on the big space opera stuff. Another part of life support is of course food supplies, and this can be done as it is right now with constant deliveries up to orbit from the ground. But that can be switched to deliveries from elsewhere in orbit, or from anywhere really. It's like how cities don't all grow everything their populations consume right next door, a lot of it is transported from far away. But it is of course also possible to set aside enough of your space station to be constantly growing food to support its occupants, or grow more than enough and export it elsewhere. I hope this has given you some food for thought on space station designs, which do best when they mesh well with the setting they're in, or are used to enhance the story, either through vibes or as part of the plot. To round things out, a simple question. What's your favourite style of space station, and does it match up with your favourite style of sci-fi? You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter and carrier design reference books, as well as 1 week early access to upcoming videos. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.